We're going to go back to the United Nations General Assembly, where Syrian representative to the United Nations, Bashar Al-Jafari, is addressing the Assembly.
And the Syrian media will distribute the true images of the victims. The inhabitants of the village said that those armed individuals had not been people from the village, but had been people who had come from another village, Ajis. The inhabitants of the village were afraid and called on the forces of order to help them. And that is what they did. But every time that there is a meeting of the Security Council, there is a spread of lies, and we see this scenario. We saw it in Hula. Mr. President, what is occurring in certain parts of my country is truly an atrocious massacre. It is unjustifiable. But certain things that have been said at this meeting here today, unfortunately, are part and parcel of that massacre, because the analysis is not well-meaning. The analysis is based on media and political work which does not relate to what is occurring on the ground. The blood of Syrians, be they civilian or military, men, women, children, young people, those who bear weapons, the opposition inside and outside, all of them are Syrians. We care for their blood, and that is why we want to find mechanisms of cooperation in order to put an end to the bloodshed of all Syrians without exception. And in my statement, I will refer to this. Firstly, the government of Syria has spared no efforts to implement its part of the Kofi Annan plan. The government of Syria has offered all facilities and all necessary cooperation, which it has also offered to the observer mission of the United Nations. And this was reiterated by Mr. Annan and by the mission several times. That cooperation and that opening have been followed by the fact that the mission signed a document today. Again, today, I declare that Syria is prepared to offer everything that it can so that Mr. Annan's mission succeeds. The doors of Syria are open to all of those who try to establish a national and global dialogue and true reform. The government of Syria stands together with all those who wish for the success of the dialogue and stands together with all those who want stability and the territorial integrity of Syria. The government of Syria has no difficulty with the national opposition internally, which is claiming reform and which refuses foreign interference. The problem arises with those who take on the nationality. The problem rests with those who attack the role of the national opposition in building the future of Syria. The government of Syria extends the hand of political reconciliation to all political forces whose hands are not tainted by blood in order to reach a conclusion, the conclusion we all wish for. Faced with that official commitment on the part of Syria, the other parties doubt the effectiveness of Mr. Annan's plan. And they expressed doubts even before the plan came into being. And some even declared the failure of the plan before it started being implemented, to the point that some said that the plan would not succeed, and others said that international observers were false witnesses and appealed to and were inciting Syrians to take up arms against others. They refused national dialogue or supported the terrorism of military groups in Syria. And by way of an example, I wish to refer to the incident with Ludvala II, a naval ship carrying weapons from Istanbul through Lebanon. 3 days ago, in Istanbul, the Revolutionary Front of Syria was created, and members of that group front considers that the battle for the liberation of Syria through weapons has come to be. They use slogans which run counter to the very nature of the Annan plan. With regard to the six-point plan and resolutions 2042 and 2043 adopted by the Security Council regarding Syria, and with a view to reaching a basic understanding signed by the Syrian government and the United Nations. In view of all of these documents, which impose commitments on all Syrian, Arab, and international actors, we hope that there will be clarity of the fact of the negative behavior that I have mentioned with respect to the six-point plan, especially the statement made by some who are not concerned by the plan and who say that the only solution will come through weapons and foreign military interference. Secondly, some states which support violence in Syria and undertake in propaganda consider that the violence perpetrated by armed groups in Syria is an act of self-defense or a reaction. Those acts try to justify the terrorist acts of those groups and try to justify the continuous supply of weapons to those groups. The question which arises here is the following. The suicidal terrorist attacks which have taken place in Syrian villages and the tragedies that have ensued and which have caused many victims among innocent Syrian people, and the attacks against government buildings, civilian buildings, are those acts considered acts of self-defense? The assassination of scientists, of doctors, of pilots, the collective killings, the explosions that have taken place in oil pipelines and means of transporting oil, are these legitimate actions? Attacks against hospitals, against medical personnel, against journalists, or against schools, are they a means of democratic expression? And what is more important still, those forms of peaceful opposition supported by foreign countries, would they be accepted by those countries themselves? Do those states accept to host an armed opposition such as the one that we have in Syria at the moment? Do those states accept the sending of al-Qaeda members to fight against the authorities. All of those states support these armed groups. Some Arab governments and capitals support the Annan plan, and all of those groups refer to the efforts. But there is armed trafficking within Syria, and this denies the clear accusations addressed to them, accusations that they incite violence and that they defined all Syrians. This is by Salafists, al-Qaeda, terrorist groups. These are partners of terrorism. And we must ask them to state their position in legal terms. The fight against terrorism isn't always conducted by fighting terrorism, but it can also be conducted by a cessation in the financing of terrorism and inciting terrorism. And thirdly, the Secretary General of the Arab League has held Syrian authorities accountable for the massacres in Hulan, his letter of the 27th, 2012, addressed to the President of the Security Council. And he stated that that atrocious massacre committed by irregular military forces in the area of Hula, in the periphery of Homs, was unacceptable. And that is why we wish to ask the following question. How can the Secretary General of the Arab States, who is a judge in the International Criminal Court, and I ask the question to those present here, how can the Secretary General render such a judgment at distance, remotely, in a matter which contradicts the report of United Nations observers on the ground, and despite the fact that investigations of that atrocious massacre was not completed. That massacre was condemned by the Syrian government, which quickly established a special committee. And today I would like to declare that we are prepared to receive a commission of inquiry made up of states known for their independence and for their respect of the United Nations Charter and for their refusal to interfere with Syrian internal affairs. Fourthly, of course, we listen to statements, to speeches, and to debates concerning the humanitarian assistance given to Syria. But the question is the following, and we're speaking of OCHA. Where is that assistance? The assistance should be distributed urgently to those who need it in certain regions of Syria. More than 6 months have gone by, and that assistance has not been distributed. We have not seen any assistance of that kind on the ground in Syria, other than the aid offered by way of food packets, which needy Syrians require.
This question is part of the political pressure now being exerted on the Syrian government. And we also wish to say that Ms. Amos has emphasized the generous contributions of the member states in response to providing humanitarian assistance to Syria. She said that this assistance had reached the sum of $118 million a week ago, but Mrs. Amos emphasized her concern regarding a third of such assistance devoted to humanitarian programs outside of Syria, and the remaining sum will be dedicated to humanitarian assistance to the Syrians, but outside of Syria. Therefore, only 1/3 of such assistance was given to Syrians in Syria. Therefore, what is the position of the United Nations in terms of its interest in the humanitarian aspect in Syria? What is its position regarding unilateral illegal sanctions that some states are imposing on 23 million Syrian citizens deprived of gas for household use and basic foodstuffs? We indeed would greatly have hoped that the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, who has been here in New York on several occasions, we would have hoped that he would have asked the Security Council to pass resolutions which are not in contradiction with the pillar of joint Arab action, namely the Pact on Joint Arab Defense, the Pact for Joint Arab Defense, in order not to, in fact, pay service to Israel's colonial practices and its customs. We would like to see him devote one of his visits to the UN to a consideration of resolutions dealing with the sufferings of Syrian citizens under the occupation, and the League of Arab States, by consensus, has adopted numerous resolutions demanding that the Security Council put an end to Israeli occupation of the occupied Arab territories. The last resolution was that adopted by the Baghdad summit during March. I would like to draw the attention of the Secretary General of the League of Arab States to the fact that this meeting coincides with the 45th anniversary of the beginning of the Syrian occupation of the occupied Arab territories in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. Numerous international areas here have shown there have been serious violations of human rights committed by armed groups in Syria. Hostage-taking. Hence, for example, Lebanese and their fate is, and their plight is unknown. Torture activities, assassinations, acts directed against civilians, against military, and these parties see these as government loyalists. Syrians are being used as human shields. Some observers, or rather an employee of the observer mission in Syria, said to me that during the visit, his visit to Homs, he and his colleagues were surprised to find that for the most part these armies are made up of children and adolescents who are bearing arms. These children and young people are sometimes even under the age of 8, let alone the numerous investigations in the field conducted by the international media, demonstrating that armed groups are acting in violation of all of international humanitarian law. Thank you.
I now give the floor